Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan. My name's Catherine Eardley and I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening. This is episode 26. I can't believe it. That means it's been a whole 6 months since the podcast launched. So thank you so much to everyone who's listened, everyone who's shared, everyone who's contacted me and let me know how much they've enjoyed it or what they've taken away from the episodes. It really is such a privilege to hear how you've enjoyed the podcast. So today's episode is all about being productive. I picked this topic because it's something I'm a little bit obsessed with. I'm absolutely obsessive when it comes to productivity, and I'm always looking at ways of tweaking how I do things, how I manage my to-do list, and how I manage my tasks, basically. And it's also something I get asked about a lot. And frankly, it's something that a lot of people, especially right now, struggle with. The reason people struggle with it, obviously, I probably don't even have to spell it out for you, but it is really just a tricky time for so many people. There are so many people I talk to who are just absolutely juggling like crazy between family commitments, homeschooling, business, caring for relatives, everything that you could possibly think of, often doing another job or having a side hustle or basically trying to manage so many different elements of their lives that it's really hard to get anything done. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling stuck, then just know that you're not alone, that pretty much everyone to an extent is feeling like this right now. And so what I wanted to focus on in the episode is kind of how do you wrangle some of that chaos? Like how do you try and manage your to-do list and get things done when it all just feels a little bit out of hand? I just want to start off by saying as well is that although I really love thinking about productivity and thinking about ways to get more done, I've also learned over the years that sometimes you just have to be really, really realistic. And actually often being realistic is the best place to start. So when you're trying to be more productive, half of the battle, from my own experience and from people I talk to about productivity, half of the battle is not being overwhelmed, is not being in a place where you're just so worked up or so overwhelmed or just feeling like there's so many things going on that you can't really do anything. It's like you get frozen. And a lot of that's to do with our nervous system, the way it works. You've no doubt heard of fight or flight. And basically, as soon as we get overwhelmed, then that fight or flight gets triggered. And so we end up feeling panicked and anxious. And panic and anxiety are two things that are really, really bad for your productivity. So getting things done is almost as much about how you feel as it is about how you organize yourself or your time. So if you are feeling anxious and overwhelmed, the first suggestion I would make is just maybe not lower your expectations. That sounds a bit defeatist, but just really take a moment to be completely realistic about what you can and can't do. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. So what I'm going to share in this episode are 6 tips or 6 steps, if you like, to being more productive. And as I said, I read a lot about productivity. I think a lot about productivity. I'm always tweaking and playing around with how I manage my time. And so that's what really I'm distilling down into 6 steps to help you be more productive. Okay, so the first thing, and this really goes back to that feeling of anxiety and overwhelm, is get everything down. Get it out of your head, because Well, there's a couple of reasons. First off, it's very hard for you to get things done if you're not really clear about what you need to get done. But secondly, often what you find is that there's some task that is weighing on your mind and is taking up too much mental space. So it's quite hard to really get a handle on that until you've written down absolutely everything. My favorite way of doing this, when I'm just at that point where I'm completely overwhelmed, I don't know which way to turn, I don't know where to start, I find for some reason that paper and pen works better for me than the screen. It doesn't mean that I don't use online organizational tools. In fact, I use plenty, and I'll talk a little bit more about those later. But when it's at sort of crisis point, which in January or February 2021, we pretty much lots of people are at, paper and pen is helpful because it also takes you away from screen, takes you away from distractions. And if you can squeeze out 5 minutes to just sit down with a piece of paper, then you can start getting everything out. I like to take a piece of A4 paper, fold it in half again. So I have 4 quadrants. I write A, B, C, and D in each quadrant. And then I just start letting everything come out of my head and onto the paper. So A are things that are urgent. They have to be done, and they have to be done very soon, usually today. So for example, refund a customer who's complained, or you have to get to the post office today, or whatever else it is. Hopefully not file your taxes. Hopefully you could be a little bit more forward thinking than that. But whatever it is that has to be done today, then that goes in column A. Everything that has to be done this week, I put into B. So it needs to be done soon. It's not something I can just put off, but it doesn't have to be done today. There are other days it could be done. Everything in C is the kind of big picture things. So this would be things like, for example, improve my SEO, or come up with a content strategy, or decide what I'm going to do about my email marketing. So they're kind of big things. Another way of looking at it is what's known as important but not urgent. So A is important and urgent, and C is important but not urgent. So the C tasks are the ones that when you do have blocks of time, you can look at them. Sometimes I end up finding that what has been making me feel overwhelmed is that I've got these C tasks in my head. So I want to rewrite the welcome emails for the members of the Resilient Retail Club, or I want to do more work on my SEO, or I want to investigate Pinterest more, or work on my Pinterest content. And I've got it in my head that I need to get it done. And so it's taking up mental space. But when I write it down, I realize, well, actually, this doesn't even have to be done this week, this month even. Sometimes I've written things down and then decided that actually that's what I'm going to do in the second half of the year. Who knows? And very often when people are feeling overwhelmed, usually the best thing to do is to spread out the timeline. So for example, if you said, right, I'm going to get email marketing done, I'm going to start sending a weekly newsletter. Again, there might be something that you've decided is urgent, but actually when you write it down and you think, okay, well, let's be realistic. Maybe it's something that I can do in a month or even 2 months. So often the answer to that overwhelm then is extending out the time period that you give yourself to do things. And then D is anything that's kind of unimportant. So it could just be that it's in the back of your mind, but you could either delegate it or not bother doing it, or it's things like we think, oh, I must, clear out my drawers, organize my desk drawers. And actually, okay, so that's taking up mental space because I'm thinking about how I need to do it. But in reality, it's not really urgent and it's not really important. It's not actually going to make the difference for my business. So once I've got them all down, then I can start tackling the A's. I can just go, right, okay, today this is what needs to get done. And then I just dig in and get going. And I also, just to note as well, I often just get everything down in my brain. So even if it is something that is family or, home life as opposed to business focus, then that's fine too. So for example, my washing machine needs to be drained and I need to try and work out why the pump is jammed. So that's pretty urgent. That would go on the list as well, even though it is not strictly, it's not to do with the business, but our lives are not that clearly delineated. So it's fine. The overwhelm in our brain comes from the fact that we are juggling all of these different roles. So why not write them all down? Once you have got them all written out as well, I also this is what I mean about flicking between the offline and the online. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'll sit down, do that, the A, B, C, D. And then I actually have a Trello board as well, which is set up in the same way. So it's today, this week, sometime, and probably never. So which effectively equates to the ABCD. And then what I do is I like to cross-reference my kind of brain dump, and I'll just make sure that I've captured them all on the Trello board so that I don't feel like I'm going to lose them or they're going to go missing. And if you've not come across Trello before, it's a very simple tool. It is free. There's a free version, which is what I use. The functionality is absolutely great. And it's basically you organize lists and cards, and you can move tasks between the urgencies. Sometimes my this week's then have to become urgent because I haven't done them yet. But it's just very simple to use. I'm a big fan of it, and it's very intuitive as well. It's very quick and simple and easy to get going with. So once I have done this exercise, that's point number one, is get it all down on paper or on an electronic to-do list or whatever you use. You may use things already, but just basically get it out of your head so you can make space, identify what's urgent, and get on with it. The second tip is know when you're going to do things. So that is about blocking out specific times. So let's say, for example, you've done your exercise. Let's say it's the morning. You've done this exercise. You've identified tasks that you want to do. I also have again, this is flipping between online and offline. I also have a simple A5 pad with tear off sheets. That is a daily pad, and it has time slots on it. So it just has times of day broken out into half an hour slots. It's very simple. And then at the beginning of the day, I will work out not just what I've got to do, but when I'm actually going to do it. So if I have the podcast recording to do, or I have a client session, or I have emails that I have to go through, or whatever else it is that I have going on, I will block them out into my time slots. So I've got it mapped out in front of me on a piece of paper. Actually, as I said, not just what I'm going to do today, but also when I'm going to do it. And you can do this on a weekly basis as well. Sometimes I will look at my week. I will equally block it out, but I have got a weekly planner pad as well. The reason that I block out the times is well, there's two reasons really. The first one is it helps me understand when I'm being really unrealistic. So that's usually the case. I've decided I've got 7 things I'm going to do today. And actually, when I look at plotting it out onto the times, I realize I probably can do 4 of them. So then I know that the other ones have to shuffle back, and it stops me from getting overwhelmed. The other reason I do it this way is because it just helps me be specific. So rather than saying, okay, I've got the whole day free, I can say, right, well, from 9 to 10, I'm going to focus on this. And from 10 to 11, I'm going to do that. And it just gives me that real structure to my day so I can just get on and get things done. And also it helps me be realistic when there are days when I don't have huge amounts of time and I've just got 2 20-minute slots to get things done. And then I can really recognize that and pick the 2 things that just have to get done in those time slots and park everything else. The third tip I have is less to do with the actual planning process, but more to do with your own sort of self-knowledge, if you like. And really that's about understanding how you work best. And I know that we don't all have the luxury right now to structure our days as we wish. In fact, a lot of us are working around a lot of other demands. So you might say to me, well, that's great, Catherine, but I actually know I work best at 9 o'clock in the morning, but that's when I'm getting my kids onto their homeschooling. So with that in mind, you still have an idea of what works well for you and what doesn't work well for you. So over time, for example, I've realized that in the afternoon, the best thing for me to do about 3 o'clock is go for a walk. And that kind of gets me out of the house and means that when I come back, I actually can focus and get a little bit more done afterwards. So the other benefit of thinking really carefully about how you like to work and how you like to structure your day, if indeed you've got any choice in that matter, is it also helps you understand where you can do low focus tasks versus high focus tasks. So for example, at some points, depending on the day, depending on what's going on, I may decide that I have to do some high focus tasks and I'm not going to get a chance to during the day. So I'm going to have to put in an hour or so in the evening to just do those high focus tasks because there's no other slot in the day that will work for them. Some things like draining the washing machine and checking the filter, that's a pretty low focus task. So if there's stuff going on around me, then I know that I can do that with other things going on. But if I've got to sit down and write a Forbes article, for example, then that's definitely a high focus task. And so I have to slot it into the day. So understanding how you like to work, understanding your energy at different times of day, and understanding the kind of focus levels of the tasks that you've got to complete are all really helpful as well, because again, it helps you be realistic. If you've got a day where you're going to have 4 30-minute blocks to get things done, then you're not going to be able to do many high focus tasks in that time. You're going to be able to maybe get 1 or 2 done, but you're not going to be able to do lots and lots of things that really require deep thought and concentration when you're going to have your day chopped up like that. So are there any other things that you can do that maybe work better for when you don't have as much time or as much focus? So when you look at your list of things to do, it might be worth just making a note to yourself about whether or not they're high focus or low focus tasks, and where you can actually slot them into your day accordingly. Okay, so point number 4, once you have got everything down, worked out when you're going to do it, worked out when would be the best time for you to do it and how you're going to work it in. My next tip for productivity really is, once you have that time slot, once you have carved out that slot of time, whether it's half an hour or an hour in your day, is that you really focus in during that time. So if you know what task you're going to get done, you know when you're going to do it, 9 o'clock comes around, you sit down at your desk or your kitchen table, wherever you're working, and then the idea is that you just focus in. So even if you have 20 minutes, 25 minutes, you can actually get an awful lot done in that time if you are completely focused. So that means turn off your notifications, make sure that you're not on your emails, unless, of course, for me, it's always the way that I end up needing to access my emails to get the thing done. But try as much as possible to stay off anywhere where you know you're going to get distracted. And my top tip, which I love, is my kitchen timer. I have a silver egg-shaped timer. I set it. It doesn't require me having an online timer or anything like that. And I set it for, usually I try and work in blocks of 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break. You might be interested to know that this is known as the Pomodoro technique, which was developed by an Italian student called Francesco Cirillo at the end of the 80s, who was finding it hard to get his studying done. And he had a Pomodoro, or a tomato, the Italian for tomatoes, Pomodoro. He had a tomato-shaped kitchen timer that he used, and he worked in 25-minute increments with a 5-minute break. Personally, I find that if I'm really getting into something, then 25 minutes in is not a good time for me to take a break. I usually want to keep going, which is usually why I do it 50 minutes, 10 minutes. But it's a really great way to just focus in. And I know that I literally have to sit there and not move and work on the tasks that I've assigned myself for that specific period of time, and then keep going and then take a break. And for me, that is definitely the best way to get things done, because it is that focus. Without focus, it's so hard to achieve much of anything, really. So I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro method. There's also an app somebody told me about this week, which is called the Forest app, which is very cute. And it looks like you're growing a tree, and, you don't want to disturb the tree growing. And after 25 minutes, you've grown yourself a nice little tree. And I think they even plant trees if you keep doing it for enough blocks. So it's a really great, if you don't fancy having a ticking timer. My kids even tell me now they can tell when I'm working because they can hear the ticking. All of this really is about clearing your mind so that you can, when you do have time to work, that you can actually focus on getting things done. So point number 5 is planning ahead. So that really goes back to looking at your calendar and blocking it out. As I said, looking at a week at a time. So I like to make my last task of the day to work out what my tasks are for the next day and have my actual time plan mapped out for the following day. And on a Friday, I like to have a time slot where I actually go ahead and block out the things that I'm going to be doing the following week, go through it, make sure I am ready to go for the following week, and just generally prepare myself so that on Monday morning when I sit down, so I'll actually plan kind of the week in general, and then I'll also plan Monday specifically. So when I start the day, I can just get straight on with whatever it is that I'm doing, as opposed to trying to work out what comes next. People have different ways of doing it. Some people say they like to think of the one thing that they have to get done the next day, or maybe 3 things that they have to get done the next day. Be realistic. If you know that you're going to have a really, really choppy day with lots of other demands on your time, then set yourself one thing to get done. And the most important thing really is that you have that clarity of mind so that when you start the next day, you can go, okay, here's my one thing. I'm just going to get on with it, as opposed to lots of head scratching or having to do another brain dump just to work out what you're going to do that day. And then my final tip for being productive is you have to be flexible. You have to be flexible and you have to be kind to yourself. It's okay to switch things around. Life is going to happen. I think that's the one thing that we've all learnt with beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that life is going to happen. Life is going to have its own plans and things are going to get rearranged. And if we always end up creating these plans and then getting upset when they don't happen or they don't happen exactly as we planned, then it just means we're going to spend more time in that anxious and upset state, and we're going to spend less time in that calm, relaxed, and productive state. So be kind to yourself. Being realistic and being kind, basically two of the best ways, I think, to be productive. If you are in a situation where you are really in a tight spot, so you know that you have got particularly difficult circumstances coming up, whether it's because of lockdown or whether it's the particular time of year or whether a particular family situation has occurred, whatever might happen, it's just, if you are realistic and you cannot get things done in your business that need to be done for the business, then that's when I would suggest that you look to get help. If you do this task, if you write your to-do list and it's just too long and there's just too many things and they're all urgent and there isn't time in the day, that is a very good time, probably even before you get to that point, is a great time to delegate. A lot of people worry about this. So I talk to a lot of product business owners, especially around Christmas, and they tell me that they want to do that. They want to get in help. They want to get someone to help them, but they don't have the budget for it long term, and they don't want to get someone in temporarily and then have to let them down later on. But I would say there are people available to do administrative tasks, for example, virtual assistants. If you work with a professional virtual assistant, you can tell them it's a short-term contract. You can say, listen, my hands are completely tied. I have all of these things going on. I just need someone for 1 week to really do my emails or whatever it is that you need. And professional virtual assistants are trained to be able to jump into situations and just get on with it, basically. Just wade in. And obviously, the more time you can help to get them up and running, the better. But what I'm trying to say is there are flexible options available. You can tell people, listen, I need help for 2 weeks. That's fine. Don't feel like the only options are to bring somebody in full-time permanently, which may not be in your budget, or for you to do it all yourself. There are plenty of options in the middle. And if that's what this is telling you when you do all of this and you write it all down and it's just not possible, then think about how can you delegate, whether that's permanently or in the short term. And it's absolutely fine if it's in the short term. But as I said, the most important thing is to be realistic. Don't look at what other people are doing. People may seem like they're getting everything done and you're not, and that's making you feel stressed. Or you just don't know what the situation is. You don't know what kind of help they get behind the scenes. The reality is they probably are getting help, or they're very stressed out, or they don't have the same situation that you do. So don't worry about what other people are doing. Don't worry about whether or not you think you should be able to do more. Just be realistic about what you can do. And remember that as a small business owner, your energy and your ability to turn up, to show up every day and to show your customers what great products you have and to really sell them to them, that is really important. You have to protect that energy. So think about ways that you can do that, whether it's shifting your expectation or getting some help in. So I hope you found that useful. As I said, this is something that I feel really passionate about, and I just think that there's so much that we can do as small business owners to be kind to ourselves, but also to just be really clear about what we can do and what we can't do, and to try and focus and get some perspective, as well as really help ourselves get into that calm, relaxed, productive state, which is very hard to be in if you're simultaneously very stressed out and anxious. I hope you found that helpful. As always, do come over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and tell me what it is that you've taken away from this, what you're going to try, or equally, if you're a big productivity nerd like me, then tell me what you do, how you manage your to-do list, what tips and hacks that you found over time help you be productive. I'd love to hear it. And as always, if you subscribe in iTunes, you will be the first to know about new episodes. If you have a minute to rate and review the podcast as well, that would be absolutely fantastic. It really just helps other people find out about the podcast as well. And as well, do check out my membership, the Resilient Retail Club, at resilientretailclub.com. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.